Evening, everyone. First, I would just like to start with a disclaimer. By no means this is a sales pitch of Cognizant. We've often been ridiculed that whichever meeting we are going, formal, informal, we are trying to bring a sales pitch. But that's not the case for this meeting. So outside of this slide and the last concluding slide, you would not see anything being mentioned about Cognizant. I think one of the feature what Nikhil alluded, which is relevant, and I think that's what brings us to this whole forum, is what we say, why analytics is such a rage. I think we're all talking about analytics, but this is the beauty of analytics. If I take definition of analytics in this room, I think it would differ by individuals, and we would not have a symbiotic kind of a definition of analytics. Second, if we look at the market, I think there are so many genres, there are so many engagements, there are so many kind of varieties and styles of analytics. It's got into a piece where I can at least vouch from my experience that there is no expert in analytics today. I think we're all learning. We are still kind of out in a mode where it's still evolving. And I think if we look from a customer viewpoint, which is essential, because who are the customers which are consuming analytics? Who are the customers which are looking at to kind of embed analytics in their mainstream? This is how the conversation started, if I paraphrase this thing, that essentially they are data rich, information poor, insight starved. I'll just repeat, data rich, information poor, insight starved. And the last statement is, I would say, very critical. Can you help solve my problem? I think that's the key when we take analytics in a journey where we are talking about, is it helping the customers and the client solving their business problem? Now, that's a very large statement, but if you see the whole piece around what we say, we usually associate analytics with a kind of a very sexy and glam kind of a industry. It is. If you go by the HBR kind of, let's say, report, yes, the data scientist, which is the new evolution of the data modelers, it's been branded as the most sexiest job of 21st century. But how many data scientists actually we have in India and overseas? I mean, that's a very kind of a intriguing question. So jumping back to what we say, the whole piece around analytics, I think what you would see in the subsequent slide is some of the trends, what are endorsing why analytics is such a pervasive or a kind of, I would say, embedded things in the organization. The other relevant point today is analytics is not only being considered as a differentiator in what we say, taking business decisions, but it's also the boardroom discussions where it's not only limited to the CIOs who are the bastions today of the budgets, but it's also being led by business owners, lines of, I would say, the function guys, the heads of the businesses which are leaning towards analytics and saying, okay, I can bring a strategic change in what I do for my business through analytics. I think that's the power of analytics we are talking about. Can I have someone for the slide, please? Thank you. This is a recent report by Gartner, got published as recent as October last year. Strategic trends in IT, top 10. The middle layer, what you see, 4th, 5th, and 6th. This is the first time ever analytics in the different genre occupies 3 pivots of strategic intents on the IT side. And there is a term which is being used very, very often by Mr. Vishal Sikka, artificial intelligence. And I think that's where it's being renowned today by saying it's intelligence everywhere. We are talking about embedded, pervasive, invisible analytics. What does it mean? I'll come to the subsequent slides which will dwell on this. But there is also, I would say, a dovetailing and embedding of what we say context-rich systems. The whole piece around what we say the digital aura, which is kind of gaining a lot of momentum. I think every organization today is trying to morph themselves into digital and saying, okay, we are the masters in digital. So there's one piece over there which is also important, what we say the smart machines. With so much of what we say the connected devices we are talking about, the IoT being the rage or the flavor of the season, there is immense potency around what embedded smart machines can do to bring analytics to the next level. Now, why this slide is relevant is something what makes the next slide, I would say, even more critical. This was a report which got published by Tom Davenport. Everyone knows Tom Davenport. I don't need to kind of introduce him. This was good about a year and a half back. And he predicted something which at that point of time was very, very intriguing and very, very controversial. And if you all go back and recall 2013-14 time, big data was a rage. Every boardroom, every kind of a meeting, every kind of a blog had big data written over it. But he actually announced at that point of time that big data is a passé. It's not the flavor or the topical trend anymore. He used a word called data economy, which literally meant that analytics at a certain point of time will start becoming a strategic asset for an organization. So the whole relevance of it being pervasive, which is being seen in the mainstream of the businesses and the enterprises, the whole piece around real-time analytics where they would be able to take decision on a real-time basis, and also the piece around what we say embedded, where each of the decision making in the different functions will happen through embedded analytics. I think that relevance, if you kind of link to the earlier slide, gives a large testimony to this guy who kind of very well announced that data economy will hold the whole pieces for the future in terms of analytics. Can you jump to the next one? I think if we extend the first two slides, so what's relevant out here is what you see. Now this is our own, I would say, understanding what's happening from the evolution and the adoption of analytics. As company embrace more analytics, from a stage where it was IT-led business intelligence data warehousing kind of a function, to a stage where we are talking about smart machines, to a stage which exists today, what we say more about personalization. This all linkage for the next 10 years, we're talking about a 2020 stage where we're talking about a phenomena where more of what we say are B2C transactions, more of smart machines will drive the whole what we say embracement of analytics. Now what's relevant in this slide in the lower rung of the space is what we say that usually you could see the business processes coming all together and we forming analytics capability. Now we assume in the time to come as analytics become more mainstream, more pervasive, the capabilities of analytics itself will define what processes should be within the organization. Now that's a great move where we talk about today the upstream and the downstream of the data, and analytics being kind of a, let's say, a embedded kind of a feature which can accentuate the business value chain of any enterprise. But cut to a stage where we're talking about if the whole piece of momentum continues what exists today, the piece around the B2C model and the pieces around smart machines under the IoT format will push analytics to the next level. Next slide, please. Now, this is where I think the relevance, why analytics is so relevant today, why companies are embracing, adopting analytics in a big way. I think there is a need, if you look from a pure decision making, I think there is a direct link today where we say that if you want to accentuate your business decision making, there is a direct correlation in terms of what analytics can do and what latency you have in your decision making within an enterprise. And I think that's where if you see the relevance, I think there are a sum total of all I would say multiple factorials which define why companies are embracing analytics. It's just not about the top line and the bottom line impact. It's about how much do you know about customer. I think that's one of the phenomena which is driving what we say a customer analytics side of the picture. The personalization, the individual recommendation that direct offers to billions of customers is more important, I think, for the enterprises to know that this is where analytics lie. The second piece out here is also what we say that as we see the whole adoption of analytics getting mainstream, Functions like supply chain, HR, finance analytics. Now there, the whole decision making, which was a bit stunted because they wanted to see how risk analytics comes into the picture, will start gaining more momentum. Now if you see all these factorials go into the decision making of the enterprises where analytics can play a part. A sum total of, I would say today, I think we're all, as third parties or consulting small niche boutique players, I think we're all struggling to define today what is a true size of analytics when it comes to capabilities. To the last extent, what we did with some of the external partners, someone told us that there are some total of 2,200 analytics capabilities which exist today. Now, I think we all can vouch that no organization today can actually cater to those kind of capabilities. I think that's where the aggregation, I would say the lump of analytics will come into the picture, that who is able to kind of focus on what. So the relevance of point solutions, the whole consulting approach, the pieces around productization will start gaining more exposure. Next slide. I think a very relevant feature today, and this is again what we say when we start parsing the whole analytics flavor and say, okay, what's relevant for what industry? The whole capability set of definition of analytics come very, very relevant when you start with banking, you start with insurance, or start with entertainment industry, or you start with healthcare. The pieces of capability, what you see out here, is a mere representation. But what's important when we say about embedded analytics, when we talk about pervasive analytics, these capabilities straddle the whole value chain. We are talking about everything from looking at a store to the background in terms of supply chain to looking at how you can augment the whole customer, I would say, database, and also look at what we say the risk compliance procedure through anti-money laundering. Now those capabilities are integral to those specific industries, but analytics today being a game changer, these capabilities are playing. And again, when I say capability, I mean service offerings, but the players are today morphing those capabilities if they have expertise and taking those to point solutions, platform products and all. But what we see, this capability set with no doubt being expanding, much more relevant, but the whole facet of analytics will come into the picture when we're talking about what these industries are gaining if you start implementing those capabilities and what's the impact it draws in terms of a dollar value. Next slide. I think one more testimony to why analytics is so important. Now this is data, again very recent, of almost 500 top respondents in different enterprises. 73% of them have either adopted or are on a stage of adopting analytics. Now what on the right side, what you see on a bar pattern is, outside of the customer, marketing, sales, R&D, there is a whole, I would say, genre of new functions within the analytics which is getting very, very, I would say, open about analytics. I mean, these are the pieces where we say that today, be it risk, be it kind of, let's say, R&D, be it kind of, let's say, even the corporate functions, they're all embracing analytics. Now, the relevance of this slide comes to the point where we say that, do we have a point position or a pivot where analytics can actually say that, okay, we can solve all the problems? To me, in my own set of, I would say, opinion, I would say still there is a lot of gap today what analytics is able to do versus what enterprises can see in terms of the impact. And I think we all have our own reasons for this, but what's more important today, as we say that why analytics is not in that mode what it should be, I think it's all got to do with the talent. If the ability of the talent not to contextualize the business problem and not to kind of relate to why the client is spending money on analytics, that particular challenge will at some point of time will become a stifling bottleneck for all the enterprises to say why we are doing analytics. I think at this level, when we say about everything in this industry, and you all have that background of analytics, boils down to talent. How agile, how equipped and how knowledgeable that talent is defines the whole stream what customers can give you the business. Next slide. I think more relevant if we pick up the top 10 trends of analytics and pretty much kind of put how the organizations need to implement these trends. I think few pertinent pieces very, very important out here. One is the whole emergence of open source. We have an expert in R today out here, and we all know Microsoft has acquired Revolution Analytics. I think this is one particular tool, if I use that word, which is giving SaaS a run for the money. The whole ability to validate the model on the fly, the whole ability to kind of do a lot of variable assumption, which is not possible in a cookie cutter format for SaaS, with all due regards to SaaS. I think it's throwing a lot of new kind of revolutions for the organization to say that now I can see that how I can cut the budgets of the clients in analytics and give them more value. Now this is where I think which is relevant when you take the other, I would say, trends where we are saying that there could be a new genre where we're talking about real-time analytics or the piece around what SAP HANA did. I mean, the embedded in-memory analytics. I think these areas will become more relevant. It's not about the whole cliche model of doing a model, coming out with an algorithm and saying, okay, I'm done with it. Unless it's proven, unless it's implemented, unless it's showing results, the whole efficacy of analytics will always be doubted. It's the last slide. I think if I have to wrap up in terms of saying why organizations need to adapt analytics, I think one of the things which we always say in Cognizant that there is something called industrialization. Now, there were phases when it was like the brick and mortar business. There were phases when it was the .K boom. Now there is a phase where we are saying that analytics will be a pivot. Digital could be the flavor of the season, or it could be the social mobility cloud. But everything, if you see in terms of a bedrock, is around analytics. I think that's where the whole relevance of analytics will always be in vogue. And I think this is one industry which we all believe if one has a reason and inclination to stay put, I mean, we can see 20 years still in the making for this. Thank you so much.